The ice moon was a bruise-colored marble hanging at the edge of a forgotten solar system. Its official designation was Vostir 6, but the 143 humans marooned there called it Cradle because the place rocked you into either madness or a second harder birth. No one on the Terran side even remembered the prisoners were alive. The war against the Rook Dominion had moved on years ago. That absence of memory had turned Cradle into the perfect oubliette, a salt blue sky streaked with ion storms, an ocean sheathed in armor-thick ice, and a single mining-turned penal complex squatting in perpetual dusk. Sergeant Elia Miro had arrived 4 years earlier, shipped in on a chain transport after the fall of Titan Station. By the time the prison shuttle's hatch slammed shut behind her, Earth's push notifications to next of kin had probably already filed her under KIA. She made peace with that the night she carved the date of her presumed death into the bunk frame. 07-2188. Beneath it she etched a second inscription, not finished yet, then devoted herself to surviving long enough to justify the sentence. When survival began to look routine, she started making plans. Cradle's warden, a 7-foot rook named Overseer Zor, believed in minimum maintenance and maximum chill. Food cubes came every 30 hours, doors unlocked and relocked via remote drone, and the only flesh and blood guards were a handful of underpaid coal-skinned mercenaries who patrolled for contraband with bored flicks of their tails. The Dominion assumed the subarctic climate and the surrounding methane oceans made Breakout mathematically impossible. They forgot that hopeless people innovate or perish. Innovation arrived in the form of Cormac Finn Fidalgo, whose convict ledger listed piracy, hacking, and aggravated cosmic vandalism. Finn spent his first months deciphering the station's mesh network, then whisper netting the data to Elia. That pipeline fed them a priceless secret. The mine held 9 industrial plasma drills, capable of boring at 1/10 the melting point of a star's corona. And 2 of those rigs lay mothballed in sub-basement 0 because corporate accountants had taken early retirement. The second secret followed on the data's heel. The Rook's 7th Fleet meant to refuel at Cradle in 66 days. 8 dreadnoughts, 13 cruisers, and an escort of cutters would anchor above the moon's southern ice shelf, spool their antimatter injectors under the polar aurora, and jump to Sol. Earth's remaining defense pickets could fend off 2, maybe 3 capital ships. 8 would cut humanity's heart in a single burn. Elia sat across from Finn at the rec hall's cracked limball table and articulated the unthinkable. "We're sitting on the world's biggest block of frozen high explosives," she said, thumbing toward the ice fields visible through the frosted glass. "What if we dig them a grave?" Finn's eyebrows shot up like neon commas. "What if we freeze first? Then we freeze trying." That night they recruited. Jailhouse legends said you only needed 3 kinds of people for a great escape: a lockpicker, a sweet talker, and a killer. For genocide-level sabotage, Elia hedged her bets. She found Narayan Noor Darzi, a disgraced Terran engineer who knew thermodynamics the way pickpockets knew wallet seams. Lonnie Osono, former Olympian freediver turned smuggler, sentenced to Cradle because nobody wanted to drown her on a warm planet. Brother Abbas, a defrocked chaplain built like an avalanche who claimed his God, forgave all sins but lacked an opinion on war crimes. And finally, Ifra Sarat, a frail translator whose only muscle was the one between her ears, but could mimic Rook's speech so perfectly, their own voice prints opened doors. They became Elia's bones and sinew. The remaining 65 volunteers became lungs, heart, and grit. Phase 1. Seize the drills. Sub-basement 0 sat below the hydroponic farms, guarded by exactly 1 bored mercenary and 2 skin-scanning turrets. Ifra downloaded Overseer Zor's voice from the station intercoms until her throat crackled with dialect. At Oro 400, she stood outside the hatch and told the turrets, in perfect Rook, "Maintenance inspection, open." They obeyed. Brother Abbas applied a rubber truncheon to the merc's head, then repurposed the man's retina for the biometric lock. When the door slid back, the drills gleamed like hibernating dragons. 20 meters long, tungsten fins folded, plasma nozzles iridescent with coolant frost. Noor's eyes glassed with pure worship. "Give me 70 hours and 10 people," he whispered, "and I turn these into scalpels." They gave him 20 hours and 14. Phase 2. Own the ocean. Cradle's surface ice averaged 70 meters thick, but fractures festooned the southern hemisphere like spider veins. Beneath lay brine black as pitch, and in places, less than a kilometer deep to the rocky mantle. Noor's simulations proposed carving a trench the length of Manhattan and half a kilometer wide, angling it so the ice crust above would arch unsupported like a poised guillotine. The plan, hollow out a room below sea level, then pump liquid brine back up so the ceiling refroze, leaving a thin shell above an empty void. When the dreadnoughts descended, directed charges would snap the ice cap. Billions of tons of ocean would swallow the fleet into a death trench, pressure crushing hulls like tin toys. The math was savage, the time savager. They moved the rigs in short, surgical sorties. From Courtyard Beta to the South Crevasse was 5 kilometers of barren wind flats. Anything traveling across that glittering plain showed up on the prison's night vision mass cams. So Elia stole the cams. Cormac Finn, being Finn, served the guards a spectacle first. At evening shift change, the monitors displayed a loop of the ice flats. Static, silent, secure. Meanwhile, real-time feed piped only to Finn's handheld slate. He watched the convoy push the first drill mounted on a commandeered ore crawler, its tracks whispering over powder snow. 30 convicts in patchwork parkas, their breath fog blurring behind like comet tails. No alarms. By the second night they walked freely, ghosts under an artificial aurora of Finn's making. Operation Freeze Frame, Noor called it, and laughter became their drug. There was laughter when Lanny, scouting through the sea fissures, slapped a portable sonar and shouted, "Hear that? That's the sound of accidental liberation." Laughter when Brother Abbas christened the first cut Salvation Gulch and sprayed the name in aerosol dye over a wall of hoarfrost. Even Ifra, who spoke in whispers and kept count of every casualty in every war, let herself laugh. The haunting stopped on day 21. It was dusk, which on Cradle meant the sun simmered like a dying ember behind amethyst storm clouds, when Overseer Zor made an unscheduled inspection of the south perimeter. His personal dropship's scanners caught the heat signatures of 4 men welding a drill's intake valve. Within minutes, plasma bolts streaked the dark and 2 inmates fell, limbs cauterized before they could scream. The survivors radioed the trench team. Elia felt the shockwave crash through her earpieces before the static fizzled. She ordered full stop, told Noor to shutter the rig's cores and evacuate to backup Cavern Delta. Noor said, "We don't have a backup Cavern Delta." She said, "We're about to." Brother Abbas volunteered rearguard. He and 5 others stayed behind with fléchette rifles swiped from the Merc's armory. They delayed Zor's troopers long enough for the rest to melt into the crevasses. When Abbas's ammo counted 0, he primed the fail-safe detonator stitched beneath his coat and spoke his last benediction. Ice to ice. The explosion gouged a newborn valley into the plains, and Zor pulled back to stitch his losses. 23 inmates didn't answer roll call the next morning. Grief might have gutted the rebellion then, had it not been for Lonnie. She approached Elia as the survivors huddled inside a half-finished tunnel, the moans of the wounded echoing like damning choirs. Laney's mask was off. Her cheeks bore wind lacerations shaped like cracked porcelain. "The trench is already a third done," she said, voice flat, eyes blazing. "Brother Abbas bought us 48 hours. We can quit and die like pet fish, or we can finish and make their fleet feed the ocean." Elia looked around. No one spoke. All waited for her to translate the silence into resolve. "Then we finish," she said, and history pivoted on 20 syllables. Phase 3. The Velvet Knife. It took Noor's fury-sharpened calculus to compress 4 weeks of tunneling into 9 days. He rerouted drilling coolant into the crew's hydration packs. They slept in rolling shifts so plasma nozzles never cooled. Lonnie, immune to claustrophobia, mapped routes by stroking fingertips along vibrating stone to read tectonic harmonics. Cormac Finn built a new sensor blind, this time bending reflected aurora radiation to create holographic mirages, so any recon drone would see only untouched plains, even as the earth beneath dissolved. Ifra became their unexpected heart. On day 32, she walked into the makeshift infirmary, unrolled a tattered Dominion star chart, and read a poem in Rook tongue over the wounded. She never translated it, but the syllables sounded like icicles chiming. Even the sedated stirred when she finished. Night 34, Elia and Ephra ascended an access shaft to scout ice thickness ratios. They broke surface inside a blowout crater rimmed by blue-black frost. Above them, the galaxy dangled like spilled sugar. Ephra scanned the horizon with infrared goggles, searching for Zor's patrols. Nothing but wind. "Do you ever miss home?" Ephra asked. "I miss knowing the word later actually meant later." Elias slumped against the crater wall. "Now it's all right here, right now, or never." Ephra's exhale crystallized. "Right now we're alive." "Right now," Elia echoed. The stars, indifferent, continued whatever ancient arithmetic governed them. Phase 4, teeth in the snow. Day 40. The trench measured 10 kilometers long, 400 meters across, 75 meters deep. Above it stretched a lid of regrown ice no thicker than a schoolhouse door. Beneath that lid, charged packets packed with antimatter seeds lined the supporting pillars. A single cascading signal would shear the uprights, drop the lid, and send the ocean roaring through the cavity like a gorgeously snarling throat. A final problem remained: how to lure the dreadnoughts into hover position above precisely the wrong stretch of shelf. Finn proposed hijacking the fleet's navigational beacons. Noor countered that tampering would trigger diagnostics. Ephra found the razor's edge between the two solutions. Dominion war doctrine required an on-site comms buoy to broadcast localized gravitational shear data before any moonfall maneuver. Fleet officers trusted only those buoys baked directly into Rook firmware. Ephra could forge firmware if she had a Dominion mainframe. Only one existed on Cradle: Overseer Zor's own command pod. Suicide by any other name. Elia volunteered herself, Noor and Lanny. Finn said he was coming too. Somebody's got to fingerprint that firmware. They readied satchels and parted with the quiet civility of people who feared goodbyes would prove contagious. The command pod perched on a basal outcrop like a beetle carved from obsidian. Snow Devils whipped its landing struts. Inside, luminous script scrolled across hollow banners, a Rook lullaby of system redundancies. Zor, armored and alone, studied casualty reports when the first intruder alert chimed. He looked up to see the door melt under Noor's plasma cutter. Elias sprinted through the breach, rifle coughing, sonic slugs. Zor ducked behind a console, roaring for reinforcements they already jammed. Lonnie flanked right, flung a shock stick. Electricity spidered across the Overseer's pauldron, shorting servo motors. Finn dove to the mainframe, jacking a cable into his neck port. "You're a long way from Titan, little ape," Zor bellowed, a bleeding grin splitting his mandibles. "And you're minutes from extinction," Elia answered. She wanted to kill him, but needed seconds bized. She shot his knee. The armor cracked. Turquoise blood hissed. Zor collapsed, howling. Finn's skin lit with scrolling code. "Firmware spoofing in progress," he muttered, eyelids fluttering. 60 seconds. Noor checked the corridor. "We won't have 60. I hear heavies." Elia knelt, pressed her rifle muzzle against Zor's throat. "Call them off." "Too late." The Overseer bared fangs. "But I'll watch your ice drown you." Finn's timer hit 0. "Done. Let's bail." They dragged Lonnie off Zor's twitching body. She'd shattered his mandibles with rifle butt in lieu of a thank you, and sprinted into the gale. By the time reinforcements breached the pod, the commando team vanished into whiteout. Behind them, the false firmware began whispering to the void. Safe hover coordinates confirmed. Atmospheric density nominal. Landing stage green. Phase 5, convergence. Day 47. Cradle's sky cracked with the arrival of the Rook 7th Fleet, 8 bone-black silhouettes dropping through ion-laced clouds like cathedral spires. Prison sirens shrieked coast to coast. Inmates pressed faces to frosted portholes, some praying to be liberated, others clutching contraband shivs. Nobody breathing. Elias stood in the trench control hub, a steel bubble suspended by cables 30 meters under ice, and listened to comms traffic funneled from Ephra's tap channels. Captain Thisk of Dreadnought German requesting final mass readings. Buoy replies, mass within tolerance. German acknowledges. Each dreadnought extended landing skids. Thruster tails painted violet swirls across the dusk. 10 meters, Laney reported, watching sonar blips descend. Detonator circuits? Elia asked. Green. Noor's children are crying to be born. Trigger deck? Finn held up a switch the size of a communion wafer. Mother, may I? Above, mechanical thunder announced contact. Million-ton hulls settling onto a ceiling of ice thinner than sin. Ilya pictured Brother Abbas, the men who never made it to this moment. She inhaled the cold filtered air until her ribs ached. Do it. Finn flipped the switch. The ice shelf emitted a cracking note beyond human register. Support pillars vaporized into incandescent spray. Vacuum swallowed the jagged edges where floor meant nothing. For one impossible heartbeat, the dreadnoughts hung, arrogant and motionless. Then the world dropped. Seawater, pressurized by 3 kilometers of overburden, erupted upward. It scythed through hull plating, smashed reactor rooms, flash froze crew in armor or out. One cruiser managed to ignite ascent thrusters. Superheated steam refroze instantly, welding its exhaust vents shut. The vessel tumbled like a struck bell and vanished into foam. Inside the hub, the tremor threw the commandos against walls. Lights flickered. A roaring filled their skulls. Lonnie grabbed the periscope feed. Where 8 capital ships had perched, now gaped a cyclopean skylight, spuming geysers tinted with alien blood. Finn whispered, Jesus wept. Status of the prison complex? Elia barked. She feared the shockwave might have ruptured their own escape tunnels. Noor checked seismographs. Holding. The perimeter fissures vented the stress sideways, just like we modeled. Ephra's voice crackled over interlink from the infirmary cavern. I feel earthquakes, but nothing is collapsing here. Ilya allowed herself one exhale of gratitude before new alarms throbbed. A single dreadnought had survived the fall, wedged half submerged, engines broken but guns intact. Its broadside turrets pivoted, targeting the ice moon's only sign of human life, the prison. Of course, Amelia muttered. They'd rather bury evidence. She keyed all channels. We need a silver bullet. Nurse spoke quietly. Reactor coolant tanks on that beast are half above waterline. If we get a plasma drill through its belly, breach the coolant, flash freeze the ammo magazines, boom. Distance? Elia asked. 2 kilometers of fractured surface. Laney grinned. I can swim that. Not alone. Finn? Elia turned. I make 2, he said. Ilya considered the odds, then slung her rifle. 3's a prime number. They suited in insulated dive armor, modified with rebreathers. The tunnel exit opened close to the trench's ragged northern rim. Steaming brine cascaded down glassy cliffs. The intact dreadnought loomed like a wounded whale, muzzle flashes licking the horizon as it shelled the prison. Explosions flared. Each impact echoed through the ice under their feet. Laney slid into the water first, a silver streak. Finn followed, dragline tether clipped to his belt. Ilya brought up rear guard, rifle sealed in watertight sling. The sea felt paradoxically warm from geothermal churn. It hissed where it met the polar air. Halfway, a turbulence wave tossed them. The dreadnought's starboard battery detonated as ricochet shells cooked off. The ship listing. They reached the armor belt near frame 78 Delta. Laney planted mag grapples, then anchored the portable plasma lance they'd hauled like a metallic crucifix. Noor's voice carried through comm beads, guiding settings. Core temp max, flow regulator 0.4. You have 90 seconds before backfeed. Finn steadied the nozzle. Ilya braced his shoulders. Laney punched ignition. A sun birthed underwater. White-blue plasma poured through hull alloy, through subdecks, through the circulatory guts of a warship not built for cauterized betrayal. Supercoolant fountains erupted as lines severed. Liquid helium met nova hot plasma, and physics chose violence. An implosion folded decks inward. A counter-explosion hurled them backward into bubbling darkness. They surfaced meters away, coughing. A thunderclap split the air. The dreadnought's spine bowed, cracked, and a column of crystallizing vapor shot skyward like a tombstone inscription. Then a ring of fire burst from its midsection. The warship broke in two and sank, vanishing beneath the boiling sheen. Silence fell, vast and unsteady. Snow began to drift again, thin and innocent. Epilogue. Day 51. Rescue signals bounced off the heliosphere and reached a Terran recon drone sniffing for far rim anomalies. The drone relayed to FleetCom, and within a week a task force warped into orbit around Vostir 6. They found an ice moon dotted with fresh craters, a shattered prison complex, and one functional buoy repeating the same message in two languages. Inmates liberated, enemy fleet neutralized. Send blankets. Inside Salvation Gulch, Elia Miro watched Terran shuttles descend like lanterns. Her people, convicts, commandos, survivors, stood in ragged formation, wearing stolen coats and new scars. She thought about the numbers carved on her bunk long ago, about later and never and right now. The universe had disowned them, so they carved their own trench into its memory. The first rescue officer strode forward, helmet tucked under his arm. He opened his mouth to speak. Elia beat him to it. "Welcome to Cradle," she said. "Mind the ice.